everyone, it's Ileana and I have another card share. It's kind of based on the one that I just posted not too long ago, the video that's up before this one. And I have a piece of Canson watercolor paper and I've taped it down to a piece of plexiglass because we have plexiglass everywhere in our house. And I took my stitched rectangle die and I traced around the outer edge. That way I knew how far to take my watercolor. And I'm using the Kuretake Gansai watercolors. And I'm learning how to use these. And I kind of find it quite fun because you can contain the mess to your paintbrush and not your fingers. Where the other card I made a few days ago, or posted a few days ago, I didn't really like getting my fingers dirty, but using a brush is way different than using your fingers. So it was a little bit more of a pleasant experience for me. What I started to do was I used a clean brush and I just added a wash of water before I added my watercolor. And I'm just working it back and forth, and I don't want to contaminate the colors in my blocks in my each little tub, and so I'm making sure that my brush is really clean. And it's probably overkill to clean my brushes this much, but it gives me a sense of control, and so I'll just keep pretending that it's making a difference. And so what I'm doing now is I am adding more of the pink because I want to create just a gradient going down the watercolor, and so the pink and combines with the blue, and so you get purple in the middle. And I really like the way that it turned out. What I didn't anticipate was that the colors would soften as the paper dried. And to speed up the drying process, I'm just going to use my heat gun, and I'm just going to dry my watercolor. And this is like watching paint dry. Okay, so now it's kind of dry and you can see that it's faded quite a bit, and I really wanted the bold colors. So now I need to go back and I need to add another layer of watercolor. And when it's dry, it's actually really it's a really cool texture on the front of the card. I really like the way it looks. And so I'm kind of really excited about doing a little bit more watercolor just because I like the way it looks. So the brushes that I'm using are from Hobby Lobby, and they're just middle of the line brushes, and I just bought several of the packs that were there. They weren't very expensive, but I really do like them. And I didn't want to go with the super cheap ones, and I didn't want to buy the super expensive ones because I didn't know if I was going to like watercoloring. But I think that these brushes are really good quality, and I have used them quite a bit. Now that I'm drying this, I'm trying to create a little pool of color over on the bottom right of the blue, just so that I can have a little bit of interest in the card, just so that it looks more like watercolor and not to get it too smooth of a blend. I just kind of really like the way it looks. And so now that I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my die to cut out my front panel. And I'm using the same die that I traced, which was the large stitch rectangle die set from Lawn Fawn. And I'm taking my stamp from the Christmas blueprint, and I'm going to make the exact same card that is in the same blog post, but I'm just using a different background. And so I'll be sure to link to that card in the video description, but I'm pretty sure most of you have already seen that. Or at least I hope you have. So I'm using some silver pigment ink, and I'm stamping it onto my card base, and I'm going to stamp it again because it didn't get good coverage. And so it doesn't really matter because I end up going back and changing the ink. But for now, you'll see all of my my entire process, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Okay, I'm using some silver embossing powder here, and this is just the generic kind from Michaels. It's the Recollections brand. And I kind of wish I would have used either a clear embossing powder, because maybe the silver wouldn't have been so bright. After I get done with this entire process, I don't like the way the silver looks on the watercolor. It's just too distracting, and you have a bold background and then you have a bold snowflake, and I just didn't care for it. I just thought it was too bright. You can't have two stars in one show. So I'm taking my shimmer paint from my Kuretake Gansai set, and I'm watercoloring the inside of the snowflake. And so this is where I decide that I want to change my snowflake to white. And I'm thinking, okay, well, it's a slick surface. The pigment ink isn't going to stick, so let me try some StazOn white. What I should have done was use my Versamark and just used white embossing powder, but I didn't think that far ahead. And so I'm about to add my embossing powder and realize it's not going to stick. So now I have to go back and clean off my stamp, and I'm going to show you how I clean off StazOn while the stamp is still on the MISTI. So what I've done is just taken a simple paper towel, and I've sprayed the StazOn cleaner onto the paper towel, and I'm just using that to wipe away the stamp. You don't want to get the cleaner on your MISTI. It's harsh cleaners like that aren't good for any acrylic. And so if you do get it on the lid of the MISTI, you need to clean it off right away. It's very harsh stuff. So what I'm doing now is I'm using my Close to My Heart scrubber, and I like it because it's got the little bristles on it and it's just getting all that paper towel fuzz off of it. And then to get off any of the residue, I am using my absorber cloth. And so this time I remembered to use my embossing buddy. So now I'm going to stamp again, and I'm going to be using Versamark, and which is what I should have done to begin with. But, you know, I'm stamping on the fly here. So I find that I make more cards if I just let the camera run rather than trying to plan everything out. It's just that time is so precious now, and there's too many things to do and too many cards to make, and so I just find it easier just to let the camera roll as I'm playing with my supplies. And I just figured that if I leave everything mounted onto the MISTI, I can always go back and fix it if I don't like the way it turns out. And I hope that you enjoy watching my mess ups as much as I think you do. So I've added my white embossing powder, and I've just melted the powder onto the front of my card using my heat gun, and I like this much better. It goes a little bit better with the white edges that are on the card, so it kind of, I think, draws everything together. And then I'm going to put the sentiment on also with white embossing powder, and I could have used white pigment ink and done clear powder, but I decided to go ahead and do the embossing powder so that it would match the snowflake. And I kind of think that gives you the visual triangle, you know, the white edges of the card front and the snowflake and now the sentiment. So I think it kind of pulls it all together. And I'm using the same sentiment from the mini handwritten sentiments from Stampers Anonymous. And I really think that that stamp set is the perfect size for card fronts. And I guess these come in larger, and I'm not sure if I would use the larger as much as the smaller ones that you see here. And so I went ahead and used my embossing buddy again, and now I'm using the Versamark, and I'm going to add my white powder again. Okay, you notice that in this video I used 3 magnets. And when you're using more than one magnet, you want to be careful to not let them snap together. These magnets are brittle, and if you let them snap together, whether it's one time or multiple times, you don't know when they're going to break in half. So you want to be careful to try to keep them separated and not to bring them so close together that they might snap together on their own. So be super careful about that. It's just a reminder to not let them hit or snap together. Okay, now that I'm done with the public service announcement, we'll get back to the card. I am just going to take a piece of cardstock, which is cut to 4 1/4 by 11, and I'm just going to score it at the 5.5 mark, and I'm going to create a top folding card. I'm going to add a lot of adhesive to the watercolor paper because it's gotten warped, not only with the paper being wet, but also with the heat embossing, and so I'm adding a lot of adhesive to the back of it. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the MISTI and I'm going to use the corner of the MISTI to line up my cardstock. So I got the one end in the corner, and then I'm just using it so that I could flatten down my watercolor. And you notice that I put the magnets opposite each other when I took them out of the MISTI so that they don't snap together. So thanks so much for watching. Head on over to my blog so that you can get updates. Be sure you subscribe there, and you subscribe here on YouTube, and give my video a thumbs up. Thanks so much for watching.